When floodwaters rose, a woman spotted a dying horse trapped in the current. Refusing to leave it behind, she launched a rescue mission that would inspire everyone who witnessed it. But that was just one woman. There are countless others just like her. 1. Drowning horse. When disaster strikes, especially something like a flood, it can be tough figuring out how to take care of everything: your home, your belongings, and most importantly, your pets. For most people, dealing with a dog or a cat might be challenging enough. But imagine having a 27-year-old horse like Callista, who's been part of your family for decades. That was the situation for sisters Michelle and Jennifer, who found themselves facing a major flood with their beloved horse surrounded by rising waters. Callista isn't just any horse. She's been with the family for 27 years, practically growing up with the sisters. She's not just a pet, she's like a member of the family. Michelle and Jennifer described her as being more like a dog or cat. They're just incredibly attached to her. Now, retired and in her golden years, Callista spends her time on the property, which has become her retirement home, as Jennifer put it. While Callista was once strong and healthy, her age in the floodwaters posed a serious challenge. The floodwaters were rising fast, and although Callista could likely swim to safety, Michelle and Jennifer worried she might get disoriented and end up going the wrong way. They also weren't sure how well she'd handle the dangerous currents of the river, especially on her own. The flood was something the family had never experienced before on this scale. They'd seen flooding in 2015, but nothing like this. Back then, they thought their house and land were safe, but the flooding in 2019 was a whole different level. In fact, the 2019 flood ended up being so much worse than anyone had anticipated that it took out homes and businesses that had been considered safe. The sisters initially thought they were okay, at least for the first few days. The floodwaters didn't affect their house or land right away. But by the weekend, the situation had changed. The Arkansas River and a tributary surrounding their home began to rise so much that they realized the flood would soon cover everything, including their house. The situation was getting worse by the hour, and they knew they had to do something to get Callista out before she got trapped in the rising waters. The house was already surrounded on 3 sides by water, and the floodwaters were continuing to rise. Michelle and Jennifer decided they had no choice but to guide Callista through the water themselves, to make sure she didn't swim into the wrong direction or get stuck in the dangerous current. In a video that went viral, Michelle was seen leading Callista through neck-deep water. The water was moving fast, and they had to be careful every step of the way to make sure Callista didn't get swept off course. It wasn't easy. Callista tried to swim in the wrong direction a few times, and Michelle had to constantly guide her back to safety. The sisters had prepared for the flood by moving Callista to higher ground earlier in the week and getting the barn ready. But no one expected the flood to become as severe as it did. Even the property where Callista was staying, which had never flooded before, was now underwater. The family's home, which was once considered safe, was now surrounded by floodwaters. They weren't able to get back in and assess the damage for several days. And they still weren't sure what to expect when they finally could. On top of dealing with the flood, the sisters faced the challenge of getting around in a region where roads were closed for miles due to the high water levels. Jennifer's mom, for instance, couldn't even get to her house because the roads were flooded. What used to be a 20-minute commute to work now took her over 2 hours. 2. Trapped fox. In this video, a rescuer spots a baby fox completely trapped in a net, looking pretty helpless. The poor thing is tangled up, clearly panicked. The man notices that the fox's parents have already bolted into the background, probably watching from a distance to make sure the little one's okay. As they get closer, the fox understandably starts to freak out. It's scared, maybe hurting a little from being stuck, and definitely trying to protect itself. The rescuer talks to the fox softly, trying to reassure it. The fox is clearly more frightened than aggressive, but it's still biting anything that comes near, including the man's hand. It's not trying to attack, it's just reacting out of pure panic. The rescuer moves around the fox a few times, switching positions to get a better angle to loosen the net. It's a bit of trial and error, but after a few moments of frustration and careful maneuvering, they get a solid grip on the fox. They check the net to make sure it's not too tight around the fox's neck, which could make things worse. Once they're sure it's safe, they carefully work to untangle the fox's limbs, making sure there's no pain or discomfort along the way. And finally, success. The net is off and the fox is free. The rescuer double-checks to make sure there are no signs of injury, no places where the net was too tight or causing harm. Everything looks good, so they gently let the fox go. The little fox, looking a little shaken but mostly unharmed, wastes no time scampering off. 3. Seal stuck in fishing line. The team is out scanning the area when they spot a seal pup with a red float and fishing line wrapped around its right shoulder. It's not an easy situation, especially because the weather is foggy, making it tough to get a clear view of the pup. Plus, the seals are constantly moving around, which makes it harder to track where the little one is going. Still, the team isn't wasting any time. They quickly get a big net ready to help catch the pup. Now, catching a seal isn't as easy as it sounds, especially when they can move fast when they need to. So, after a bit of a chase, with the pup dodging and weaving, the team finally manages to get the net around it. The pup's a little scared, understandably, but the team stays calm and gentle, talking softly to reassure it while they work to get everything untangled. When they finally get a good look at the fishing line, it's clear just how serious the situation was. The line is old and braided, with a rusty hook and swivel still attached. Heavy-duty fishing gear that could have caused a lot of damage if it had stayed wrapped around the pup's shoulder any longer. Luckily, they got to it just in time, before any injury or scarring could happen. With careful hands, they removed the fishing line, getting rid of all the dangerous junk that had been keeping the pup from being able to move freely.
Braided line.
Once the line is off, the little seal seems to realize it's free and safe. The team watches as the pup, still a little shaken but clearly relieved, slips back into the water, ready to roam and play without anything weighing it down. 4. Owl in a tough spot. It all starts with this guy spotting an owl in a really bad spot, tangled up in a fishing line, swinging helplessly from a tree branch.
Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. I'm trying to understand if he's like... Come here, come here.
The poor thing is flapping its wings, clearly terrified, but there's no way it can get free on its own. The rescuer knows they have to act fast but carefully. They approach slowly, speaking in a calm, soothing voice.
Don't be afraid, don't be afraid.
Hoping to ease the owl's panic. As they get closer, they can see just how stuck the bird really is. The fishing line is wrapped tightly around it, and the owl is exhausted from struggling. The first step is freeing the owl from the main part of the line. This takes some effort, but after a bit of careful maneuvering, they manage to get it loose. However, it's not over yet. There's still a smaller piece of line wrapped around the owl's wing. The rescuer knows they have to remove it too, or the bird might not be able to fly. With a dull nail clipper in hand, it's all they've got, they go to work. The owl isn't exactly thrilled about this. One moment it looks calm, like it understands the rescuer is helping, and the next it's glaring at them with big round eyes full of confusion and frustration.
Okay, that was part 1. Now he is free of the line.
The rescuer keeps talking softly, trying to stay patient and steady as they snip away at the tangled mess. Finally, after what feels like forever, they get the last bit of fishing line off. The rescuer gently places the owl on the ground to see if it's okay. At first, the little guy just sits there, looking around like he's not sure what to do. It stretches its wings a little, but doesn't seem ready to take off. The rescuer gives the owl some space, and slowly but surely, the bird seems to gather its strength. Then, it takes off and flies gracefully across the lake, free at last. 5. Dog covered in matting. This dog, who had been neglected for so long that his fur was a solid mess of mats, like a big heavy block.
He did not want to approach us. It looked like a piece of wood.
When the rescuers found him, it was obvious that this poor pup had been suffering for a while. His fur was all tangled up, hardened, and weighed him down so much that he could barely move, let alone feel comfortable. The rescuers said it was one of the worst conditions they'd ever seen. They had to work for hours to catch him, because he was so scared and unsure about the people trying to help. But they didn't give up. They knew he deserved a chance to feel better, and they were determined to give it to him. Once they finally got him, it was time for the long process of grooming. This part wasn't just about making him look good, it was about setting him free. They took him to the vet, where they began to carefully remove all the huge mats of fur. It wasn't easy at all. The fur was so thick and tough that it took a lot of time and effort to get through it, but the rescuers were gentle, making sure not to hurt him while they worked. As the matted fur came off, it was like a weight was being lifted off his whole body. You could almost see him starting to feel better as the layers of pain and neglect disappeared. Under all that tangled mess was a beautiful dog who had just been hidden away for too long. Once the grooming was done, he looked like a totally different dog. His eyes lit up, and you could tell he felt so much better, lighter, freer, like he was finally able to breathe. And the best part? His transformation didn't end with the grooming. Once he was free from the heavy mats, his sweet, gentle side really started to show. He walked confidently on a leash, staying right by his rescuer's side without any fear or hesitation. He had come so far, and his journey didn't go unnoticed. A loving family in England saw his story and decided to adopt him. 6. Elephant finally freed. These elephants were taken from the wild and placed in a zoo with almost no room to move around. They lived in a tiny space with nothing natural, just cold concrete walls. For 2 decades, they didn't get to live the way elephants are meant to, without grass, trees, or space to roam freely. But then, a group of passionate people in Argentina decided they couldn't let this continue. They knew Po and Gamina deserved so much more, so they worked tirelessly to find a sanctuary where these elephants could finally experience the freedom and joy they'd been denied. And after a lot of hard work, they succeeded. The move to the sanctuary wasn't easy. It took time and a lot of care to make sure Po and Gamina were ready for their new life. At first, the elephants were scared and unsure. They'd never known anything outside their concrete prison, so stepping into the outside world was a big change. Their first steps out of the barn where they'd been kept were slow and careful. They weren't sure what to make of the new environment, but as they walked, they could feel the earth beneath their feet, and it was clear that something was different. Each day they got a little braver, exploring their new surroundings. The sanctuary was like a whole new world compared to what they'd known. There were no more cold concrete walls, just mud, water, sand, and even new elephant friends. Po and Gamina discovered how wonderful it felt to roll in the mud, splash around in the water, and enjoy the simple pleasures of being elephants again. The sparkle in their eyes was a sign that they were starting to experience joy and freedom for the first time in years. As time passed, Po and Gamina began to explore more of the sanctuary with confidence and excitement. They weren't confined to a tiny space anymore. They had a whole open world to enjoy. They were still adjusting, but you could see them finding peace in their new home, where they could finally live the way elephants should. Now, with their new companions, Po and Gamina are slowly but surely finding happiness in their new life. They have the freedom to roam, play, and experience the world as elephants are meant to. 7. Frozen dog. In December 2023, a man who wasn't really into pets was out taking photos of the snow when he noticed something unusual. A little puppy lying in the snow, barely moving, like it was frozen. At first, he thought about just leaving the poor thing there, but when he realized how sick it was, he couldn't walk away. So, he picked up the puppy and took it inside his warm home. The man had no idea how to take care of a dog. He wasn't looking for a pet and didn't have much experience with animals, so he was pretty clueless about what to do. But he couldn't just ignore the pup, so he decided to give it a chance. After giving him a bath, the man realized he hadn't done it perfectly. He left half the puppy unwashed because he was trying his best, but things were a bit messy. He did manage to feed him though, and after a few tries, the puppy started to get his strength back. It was such a relief to see him stand up on his own. As the days passed, the man started getting attached to the little guy, even thinking about naming him Begonia. But deep down, he knew he couldn't keep the puppy. Taking care of a pet was a lot more work than he realized, and he didn't have the time or energy to give the puppy the life he deserved. A friend suggested taking the pup to a rescue center, and the man decided that was the best option once the weather calmed down. By then, the puppy was starting to feel more at home. He loved playing in the snow outside, but the man was still concerned about the mess he kept making inside. Eventually, the man found a new adopter for the puppy through a friend's recommendation. The new owner already had a dog, so the little guy would have a companion and a better life. When the new owner came to pick up the puppy, the man felt a little sad, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He said his goodbyes and watched as the puppy left for his new home, hoping he would grow up to be happy and healthy. The whole experience lasted only 3 days, but it was a short, powerful time that changed both of their lives. 8. Bald eagle flies again. This bald eagle was brought into the vet clinic after being accidentally shot by some duck hunters. The poor bird had fallen from the sky so hard that her bone actually poked through her skin. She was in bad shape and needed help fast. The vet had never treated a bird this big before, but to him, there was something extra special about working with America's national bird. After getting the eagle sedated, they wasted no time and rushed into surgery to fix her wing. They named her Wolf because of her fierce attitude. She wasn't going to go down without a fight. Surprisingly, Wolf pulled through the surgery and woke up much quicker than they expected. She was sent to a rehab center where she'd stay for about 6 weeks to recover, but she wasn't making it easy for anyone. As an apex predator, she didn't like being cooped up. Wolf made it clear she was not happy with the confinement and let the rehab team know she was ready to be free again. Even though she was recovering, her spirit was still as strong as ever. When she was finally strong enough and her wing had healed, the vet got the call that it was time to release her back into the wild. On a cold, snowy day, they took her out to the frozen Niagara River to set her free. Before they let her go, the vet did one last checkup, and in a little surprise moment, Wolf remembered him. She even gave him a little nip, as if she was grateful that he'd saved her. 9. Baby deer asks for help. One day, a woman was out in the woods when she stumbled upon something unexpected. A tiny baby deer all alone. The little fawn couldn't even stand up yet, and it was clear he was lost. She looked around, hoping to find the fawn's mom, but there was no sign of her anywhere. After searching for about 20 minutes, the woman decided to leave, hoping the mother would come back for him. But as she walked away, she just couldn't shake the feeling that she had to do something. The fawn kept popping into her mind, so she decided to go back and look one more time. When she found him still alone, she knew she couldn't just leave him there. She grabbed some supplies, called a few wildlife rescue groups, but no one answered right away. While she waited for a response, she stayed with the fawn, trying to keep him calm and figure out what to do next. Eventually, a rescue group got back to her, and they arranged to take the little deer to a rehab facility where they could care for him properly. The rescue team said the fawn was only a couple of days old and had probably been separated from his mom for more than 24 hours. It was a touch-and-go situation for a while, but thankfully Scout, named after his brave rescue, pulled through. Now, he was in a safe place where the experts could take care of him until he was strong enough to be released back into the wild. 10. Family of bunnies stuck. One day, a family of tiny bunnies found themselves stuck under a storm grate, trapped in a deep hole that was filled with plants and tangled vegetation. When a group of rescuers found them, they knew they had to act fast. The first thing they had to do was carefully lift off the heavy grate covering the hole. It wasn't easy though. It was about 6 or 7 feet deep, and the hole was full of thick, tangled plants. To get a better look at the bunnies, one of the rescuers climbed down and started cutting through some small trees to make space. The bunnies were super tiny, about the size of a fist, and very fragile, so the team had to be extra careful not to hurt them. They worked quickly because they knew that too much stress could be dangerous for the little creatures. As they rescued the first few bunnies, they realized they needed to cut another part of the grate to get to the remaining ones, who were hiding in a ventilation duct. Once all the bunnies were out, they gently placed them in a box and rushed them to a nearby shelter. Thanks to the fast thinking and careful handling, all the bunnies made it out safely. They were taken to a shelter where they could be looked after and kept safe. 11. Abandoned puppies saved. This woman came across a heartbreaking scene. 6 tiny puppies shivering and all alone by the sidewalk. It was clear they had been dumped there, unwanted and left to fend for themselves. They were cold, weak, and scared, so the woman didn't hesitate for a second. She quickly scooped them up and rushed them to her car to get them out of the cold and warmed up. Once they were inside, she noticed some of the puppies had signs of ringworm, which made her even more worried, but she reassured them that everything would be okay. She cleaned them up as best as she could, gave them water, and made sure they were comfortable. The puppies were starving, so she fed them. and soon enough, they started to feel a little stronger and more relaxed. The woman didn't stop there. She found a foster home that could take them in and care for them. In their new home, the puppies started to thrive. They were no longer on the cold streets, and they finally had the chance for a better life. 12. Man saves sharks. This guy got a call about a group of sharks that had gotten stuck in shallow water after a sulfur eruption caused a drop in oxygen levels. The sharks were small, but they were still pretty strong, and at risk of dying because they had been stranded in the heat. So he rushed to the scene to help. When he got there, he realized the sharks were bigger than he expected, with the largest one weighing around 40 pounds. They were fighting like crazy when he tried to grab them, shaking him around. And he quickly learned it wasn't going to be easy. The guy tried to catch them in the water, but that didn't work, so he came up with a new plan. Scare the sharks into swimming fast enough to beach themselves, then drag them to higher ground. With the help of some people who jumped in to assist, he managed to get the sharks onto the sand, but it was a huge struggle. They were stressed, and he was exhausted. But eventually, he calmed them down enough to carry them to deeper water, about 150 meters away. Once they were back in the ocean, the sharks finally relaxed. Which one of these rescues was the most heartwarming for you? Are there any stories that we might have missed?